All right, let's get more on this with tech journalist Jacob Silverman here in studio with us. Hi, Jake. So that was just an extract of that conversation that Zuckerberg had during that Recode interview. But basically, he was coming across as saying, well, you know, we all get something wrong a little bit of the time, and sometimes we get things more wrong than others. Is this any way for the Holocaust to even be considered, as you can get this bit wrong and that bit wrong?
I think that's why people were so taken aback at Zuckerberg's comments. He really seemed naive in a way, I think, that he doesn't seem to realize that some speech actually does rise to hate speech, and that certain forms of speech aren't simply mistakes or someone not really knowing what they're talking about, but that actually has an intent to demonize people and incite violence.
Well, then he was trying to say that he's encouraging debate on the issue, saying, and I quote, that I believe often the best way to fight offensive bad speech is with good speech. Is that a valid point, to open a topic like this up for debate because it may lead to better education, or are there certain topics that should just be taboo? You don't even venture to debate them.
Well, I think that's what Facebook is starting to encounter now, is that there are certain topics that probably should be taboo or should be synonymous with hate speech or violent speech. And what a lot of experts are saying is that Holocaust denial is very much in that category. But Facebook sort of abides by this kind of libertarian-infused idea that we're going to fight good or bad speech with good speech. And I think the last few years have proved that that doesn't always win out. Well,
this points, of course, to the broader issue of what kind of content is allowed on social media and who should be policing that content, and what are the criteria that they use to police that content, and should it be left up to the team at Facebook, or is it time for there to be perhaps more government regulation?
Well, that's what Facebook is definitely facing abroad. In countries like India and Sri Lanka and Myanmar, they're being pressured to do a lot more about misinformation, which is really leading to violence in those countries. And I think, as we're seeing here in the United States with election misinformation and election manipulation, the company can't necessarily be trusted to act on its own. It's going to take some kind of outside pressure.
Well, what is defined as misinformation and what is defined as fake news? Because it's not always the same thing. What criteria does a company like Facebook use?
Well, that's the problem, is we don't always know. Facebook plays that very close to the vest. Sometimes that information gets leaked. The website Motherboard has reported on some of Facebook's standards for what rises to the level of hate speech, but often we simply don't know how Facebook judges that kind of distinction.
Do you think that we should have more regulation then in the U.S.? I mean, we talk about how terrorism you get incitement for terrorism on sites like Facebook, where there are platforms where you can get a how-to a step-by-step guide on how to attack people. So we know that that is definitely a taboo, right? But there are those sort of gray areas. Should this be maybe by some kind of majority vote? What would be, in your opinion, the best way to try and differentiate the content that is allowed and not allowed?
I think, first of all, Facebook has to be open about what its standards are and what rises to levels of deletion or having a user banned or anything like that. Those are the kinds of standards that often aren't discussed very much in public right now. And then I think Facebook needs to get simply a lot more subject matter experts, a lot more language experts. You especially see that overseas. Facebook doesn't have actually people who speak the local languages in some of these countries where misinformation is a huge problem and is actually leading to violence.
I wonder if this would be such an issue if Facebook wasn't really monopolizing that space, you know, with the exception of like Instagram, but that's not really a platform for discussion.
That's right. I mean, I think part of the problem is Facebook is such a global network with obviously over 2 billion users, but it often lacks expertise in some of the areas in which it's really rather dominant.
All right, Jacob, thank you for being with us. Jacob Silverman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.